only had 45.
I'm sorry.
Carly, you said you only had 45 minutes. So I have a couple questions. If we can just do like a round robin experience, and if there's anything that you guys want to add that you haven't talked about by the end of this, just tell me, can we talk about this? I don't foresee that happening. I have some pretty well-rounded questions to ask, but if there is anything at the end that you think, okay, we didn't really touch on this as much as I would like to, feel free at the end to say, Julia, like let's revisit this.
Sounds good.
So this is just going to go out to anyone who would like to start us off. What is Sack the Stigma?
You guys want me to take the lead? What do you guys think? I'll just start it off. Sack the Stigma is a mental health campaign that was started here at the University of Michigan with Soho Youth Club and Valiant. And so in the fall of 2021, Brett approached me with an idea to do some sort of philanthropic initiative with between Soho Youth Club and Valiant, two apparel brands. And with Valiant being a licensed apparel vendor at Michigan, we have the rights to use the school marks. And with me having been a former athlete here, and with Carly being so tied in with the with the football team, and Brett being a student here, tied in with some of the athletes as well, we saw it as a really good opportunity to do a mental health campaign with the University of Michigan football team. And so what started in what might have been like October of 2021 took about 3 to 4 months to really sort of get off the ground. A lot of different hurdles working with the school just on what is compliant and what isn't in terms of like how you set up a not-for-profit campaign working with school marks and with student athletes. But it's turned into a very well-received campaign where we have an apparel line that is sold through the official retail vendor or retail partner at the University of Michigan called the MDEN. And so we have t-shirts and hats that are being sold through the MDEN, where the proceeds from those sales are going towards the university's CAPS program. And then, Carl, you can kind of dive into like what CAPS is and how our money is being allocated. You can probably explain a little bit better than I can.
Yeah, so my role in this was I do work for football and I work in recruiting, so not necessarily mental health related, but I also work for a company called BLND and help out with their mental health. And so my kind of side and perspective on this situation was the mental health side and coming up with the content that was posted about the campaign and how to allocate the money in the sense of why is it important for it to be going out to students. And so CAPS is the counseling services on campus. Most schools have CAPS at their school, but it's counseling and psychological services. And Michigan is the one that is receiving. We decided to use CAPS for Michigan specifically because we were using the licensed block-in. So that was why we went there. And then how we said why it was important is because of the continuity of care. So making sure that part of therapy and part of creating a good bond is building that rapport with your therapist. So being able to have the same therapist and have that continuity of care is extremely imperative when working with an individual, because you get a lot more work done when you actually have a relationship with them. It's a lot less about the modalities being used and a lot less of like specifics about what's being used in therapy and more focused on that rapport and that relationship that's built. So when students are in therapy and then asked to briefly stop because CAPS can't hold them and they might not be able to afford outside counseling, that becomes an issue and that continuity of care breaks, which is very bad for the client. So our program is hopefully to raise enough money so that we can pay for individuals and for students to have that continuity of care and pay for their care outside of in CAPS and outside of CAPS, so that when they're transferred out into the I say the real world, but into the world outside of counseling and academic counseling and psychological services, then they are able to continue working with that individual for a solid period of time so they can get the proper care that they need and deserve.
Yeah, it's interesting because a lot of the athletes that I have on this podcast have some experience with mental health counseling. It normally occurs at their college level, but then I've also interviewed individuals who started having those kind of resources in high school, or had the resources in college, but then didn't have them in a professional setting, whether that be professional sports or even like outside of the realm of athletics in the job. So it's really interesting that that kind of liaison step outside of the realm of athletics is helped. That's really good.
I
And
do want to add, the
yeah,
money is for any students on campus. It's not just for athletes. So the campaign, we used athletes to raise awareness of the campaign, to spread awareness of it. And because part of stacking the stigma is stacking the stigma in athletics, but also just with all students in general. So the continuity of care and for CAPS is specifically just students on Michigan campuses and not just specifically for athletes.
perfect. That's even better.
Yeah, I think a powerful part of like the campaign is showing that like, you know, some of these athletes on campus, especially on the football team, are viewed as these like massive like superheroes, right? Or like they have just like the toughest kids on campus, but in a way that doesn't really reflect kind of the mental side of your life. And while you can be a tough, rigid, rugged football player, like you still go through the day-to-day difficulties of being a college student. And there's just a lot of there's just a stigma within most football locker rooms of being tough and not having to discuss your, you know, things that you're working through, or seeing professional help, or talking about therapy and why it's helpful. So we thought that you know, starting with the football program and basing a campaign around our football team was the way to do it and send a message to the campus.
And the athletes are people first. I feel like it's
Yes.
like
Exactly.
Absolutely.
And I watched the entire video on the Sack the Stigma portion of that Soho Youth Club website. And I just think it's so interesting that regardless of what position these players were, they all had a very similar story. I mean, what's the, I guess, how has on the Michigan campus, how has this been taken in? Essentially, like what's the feedback been?
I think that our goal ultimately is for, and I say goal, but also think that like we're working towards it, is for, you know, there's a lot of students on campus at Michigan. I don't know the exact number, but like over 30,000, I believe. So, I mean, what we're working towards is for that massive student body to see these football players that we're just a game away from the national championship. Like, people look up to these guys and care so much about what they do both on and off the field. So, I mean, we carefully worked with these like specific athletes just to kind of like allow these guys to serve as role models for the massive student body that exists here. So like we want those 40,000 kids that are on campus as students to see that video and kind of understand like, hey, like these guys that I look up to are also students, and they're just like me, and they struggle in the same ways that I struggle. And they talk about how they get help, whatever, and ultimately just sack the stigma and make it so the students out there kind of don't feel this, like, I don't know the best way to describe the actual feeling, but they don't feel the hesitancy to speak up about needing help and talking to people about what their struggles are. So I guess ultimately we want this video to serve as a tool of inspiration and motivation for the student body to, you know, go seek help and normalize having mental health struggles and battling them.
Yeah. I think it's been very well received as a whole too, based off exactly like what Brett was saying. I feel like that is what has been happening. I think we've all gotten a lot of feedback from different people. I went into the MDN and the shirt was right in the front when you first walked in. And so that was really special and cool to see. I think the hats nearly sold out if they didn't sell out, and which is amazing. And I got a lot being in football, and I was one of the contacts to connect them, to bring them onto the set and to create the questions. And they all thanked us. They were all very appreciative, and they all separately were like, thank you for doing this, because this is something that's so important to our community. So I think that the athletes and the students have both been very appreciative and thankful, and understand the importance behind why we're running this campaign.
What does your outreach strategy look like and entail?
It's not too complicated. Like, we went ahead and filmed that video, which you obviously watched, and then like after that, it was kind of, so like both Soho Youth Club and Valiant social media pages definitely have a lot of support from the Michigan fan base and like students and like whether they're students or they're alumni or they're simply Michigan fans. There's a lot of people that care about Michigan that follow both pages. So we really just like leaned back on our social media followings in order to promote everything. We didn't have any like crazy thought through marketing strategy where we were gonna like whatever. It was really just a matter of filming the video, filming and having the players wear our t-shirt and hat in that video, and really just kind of using our own social media channels to promote it through.
There was a couple of different like local media outlets that picked up on it and then, gave it a retweet online or whatever that may be. And all of that just like additional exposure was solid for the campaign. And I think it was just a great like foundational start to like, hey, this is what we are. This is what Sack the Stigma is. And that, it's something we'll be able to continue to build upon as time progresses and more student athletes are interested in taking part in the campaign as we create more content in the future. I also think it's exciting because it's something that obviously we started here at Michigan and that's where all of our roots lie. But like, it is something you can implement at other teams around the country, even at the pro level. Some of my former teammates who saw the campaign said like, this is something they for sure would like to support. And it's something you can expand bigger than just the University of Michigan. But being here at U of M and be able to work with the school to make it a licensed product, be able to support the CAP system here at the University of Michigan, I think it's just like a great foundational start for what we're doing and something we'll be able to build upon as time progresses.
Yeah, and to piggyback off of that, I think we all have talked about how we would love to continue this and to make it bigger. And with the people that I work with at Blend, they've all talked about how they've actually talked to different coaches at different schools and different people at different schools about spreading awareness in that way too. So one thing that I want to continue personally to do is continue to work on making content and coming up with different types of psychoeducation pieces to use psychoed to continue to spread the campaign in the sense of like mental health spreading awareness, and then continuing like Jared and Brett were saying, to raise awareness for the Sack the Stigma campaign as a whole, and hopefully bringing it to different colleges, to different levels, and to the NFL. But continuing that psychoed with the back of Valiant and Soho Youth Club and a mental health company, it can really have the ability to push pretty far out nationally, which I think would be really cool.
How did the three components come together?
Like between Soho Youth Club, Valiant and Blend, which is
right
group I works with. Yeah.
Right.
Pretty organically. It started back in the fall of 2021 when Brett had reached out, and his outreach was really more so about doing something philanthropic, but tying in Valiant and Soho Youth Club, but it wasn't more so geared towards like mental health at the time. And then after kind of brainstorming with him, that was kind of the idea we came up with, was let's do a mental health campaign here at the University of Michigan. And I actually had a relationship with someone within Carly's company at Blend, the founder, Brooke Buys. And so I have been talking about some concept like this for a while now with her. We've had a long-standing relationship, and she's like, you need to talk to Carly because she's like the perfect fit for what you're trying to do here. And she's potentially going to work with us here at Blend. So it all kind of came together very organically, and I think it, a great team thus far, and we've done them, in a short amount of time, really over the last 6 months, put together a really good foundational layer for a great campaign that not only will be able to continue here at Michigan, but expand to other schools and other programs in the future.
How important was it to launch something like this tailored to the cause that it is during a time COVID-wise where we weren't exactly communicating at our peaks, especially not about mental health.
Yeah, well, I think like Jared described, we sat down several months ago without knowing that like we wanted to shape this initiative around mental health. It was simply a conversation that started with like, hey, Soho Youth Club and Valiant should team up. We should do some sort of collaboration together. And then the discussion continued into like, all right, now that we know that we're going to like put together some clothing collab and some philanthropic initiative, it was a question of like, what sort of causes are we both passionate about and do we want to contribute to, especially knowing that like we're here on a college campus, whatever. And so I think that's when like the conversation just pretty quickly turned to mental health. Just in terms of something that I mean, Jared and I were definitely both passionate about and wanted to contribute to. And then whatever, I think that there's like, in terms of causes we could contribute to on a college campus specifically, mental health probably tops the list in terms of what's most relevant to everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. I think everyone can agree, like these last 2 years especially have been, just pretty overwhelming for a lot of different people for many different reasons. And the mental health topic is becoming a little bit more relevant as I think we see like some of the pitfalls of like modern society and like certain things that we value and, just certain things that our demographic and generation has kind of grown up with. I just think like when you're kind of getting into your 20s, which a lot of college students are, you're just dealing with a lot of real life things and coming out of, a pandemic, right? Like something that nobody's gone through before, and there's no best practice, and people are still kind of reeling on how to cope with some of the issues that they're facing, mentally, maybe losing a loved one to it or being isolated or whatever the fallout was or whatever someone's going through. I just think there's a lot of reasons why this campaign makes a lot of sense right now. And for the demographic we're going after, why it's pretty applicable to, to what everyone's facing.
Yeah. And to add on to that, we did a lot of research on mental health and found that 1 in 5 adults actually struggle with mental illness. And then suicide is actually the second leading cause of death for this kind of age range. So it was 10 to 34, but specifically like college age students. So suicide being that high as a cause of death is really something that we want to make sure that we're bringing awareness to. And so thinking about just like the exact, like COVID obviously brought up a lot. COVID also allowed for more telehealth, which I think is important too, to keep in mind, which gives this a good platform as well to be able to spread and be able to provide those types of services. And then just thinking about like being a student during this unknown time, and specifically athletes when they were losing their seasons and that transition home and away from home and like home struggles, because people during COVID had to live at home more because they couldn't live on campuses, and just that whole balance of getting back into school. People forgot how to do school and forgot how to be able to like control everything and provide. So being able to provide that sense, I think also during this time is really helpful.
So I guess this is the question more to Brett and Jared. What else was on the table when you were trying to figure out what kind of causes this was going to turn into?
I mean, Brett, do you want to start? Brett's done a multitude of different philanthropic causes. And, so he had actually done something mental health related in the past, but I mean, you can touch on what Soho's done and some of the different, initiatives you've done.
Sure. So, I mean, just to give you like a little more background behind like what exactly Soho Youth Club is, like we're a clothing brand, and every individual collection of clothing that we release is tied to a different philanthropic initiative. So we ultimately put together these collections that are focused on different causes, and we either take profits and donate them to whatever the cause at hand is, or we on the company's expense put together like an actual philanthropic initiative, whether that be like a workshop or something that's just kind of like more hands-on than simply donating profits. So I mean, like we've done, it's hard for me to like remember everything now. We've done like 2 different like tie-dye workshops. We did a financial literacy workshop. We did a music workshop. We did a previous mental health initiative. We donated books to incarcerated New Yorkers. I mean, the list goes on. We've done, I mean, I think like probably around 15 initiatives at this point. And so, I mean, when Jared and I sat down, it was like there's no restrictions on like what we can or can't do. It was really just a matter of figuring out like something that we're both passionate about, and something that like we both care to do. Because at the end of the day, like we're not putting together these initiatives just to like put together these initiatives. Like we want to contribute causes that we're personally passionate about, we personally think matter. And so, I mean, quite honestly, it was months ago. So like, I don't like completely remember if there were like alternative ideas that we were discussing before we just like landed on mental health and said, let's do it. But I mean, I'm pretty sure that like, as we were going through that conversation, once we hit like mental health and it was like, I'm passionate about that. And Jared was like, I'm passionate about that too. It kind of was like, why even think any further? This is like super relevant and something that we could definitely contribute to.
Yeah, and that's where I kind of go back to just the organic tie-in, especially with Carly, because BLND, the group that she works with, I've known the founder there for years, and have developed a really strong relationship, and have just had been the past 2 years throwing ideas around of like, you know, a way to do something mental health related, but something that was kind of just like, I didn't really have time for it to be my full-time thing, but wanted to get it going on the side. So I've just been, you know, over time thinking about how I could do something meaningful and impactful, because it is just like a cause that hits like really deeply for me. So yeah, when Brett and I got in touch back in the fall, and it didn't take, you know, within our first conversation, it was, hey, this is what we're going to do. It's going to be something mental health related. Didn't take long to kind of putz around and figure it out. And I think it hit for us, and we just decided to run with it, and we're excited about that's the cause that we're working towards.
And then did it help that there was a stigma surrounding football players not asking for help when they need it? Is that why they work so well as the spokespeople for this kind of a campaign?
I think so, in a way. I mean, I'm not too far removed from playing college football, and I remember being in the locker room, like that's not like, it was a little bit taboo. Definitely not something that, you know, is you're kind of open to talking about amongst your teammates. You may develop like, you know, your close friend group that like you're a little bit more comfortable speaking with, or some guys have mentors or therapists that they're already working with, but it's definitely not something you were openly talking about, or just talking about just like in general, like, you know, what is like working through, you know, depression, what is being bipolar, right? These like real world things that a lot of guys were struggling with, but just didn't even know they were struggling with it because they had to internalize it. Because in a way, like, I think like football is one of the best sports out there, right? It teaches you a lot of, you know, how to be tough, teaches you how to work through certain things, but working through a sore knee is different than working through depression, right? Like you can't just like put ice on it and, you know, work through it and just tough it out and then come out the other end. A lot of times, if you're internalizing it and trying to just push through it, it's actually negatively affecting you. So I think that's like the big piece of this campaign, that like these, like with these athletes coming out and being vocal about, hey, like therapy is cool. Like, you know, mental health is very important, right? All these like certain things that you just need to like say it. And you might need to see someone you look up to saying it for you to feel comfortable too. That's why working with football players at the University of Michigan is, you know, arguably one of the best places, I believe, to start a campaign like this, because if you get a guy like Blake Corum or Donovan Edwards, right, to many people, these are like superheroes. They're some of the top players on our team and some of the top players in the country. Them talking about it, just that small action, I think opens up a lot of doors and breaks down a lot of the stigma that some others might say, like, oh, like, well, I think those guys are cool and those guys are talking about it. So like, okay, maybe it's not cool to talk about your feelings or to talk about mental health. So that's kind of why I think it makes sense to work with football players here at Michigan, why it's a great place to start the campaign.
Yeah, and piggyback off of that too, Jared touched on it by saying athletes are superheroes. And so people have such high expectations for them, but I think people forget that athletes are people first. I said that earlier, but it really is true. Like people expect them to be able to do this, and this, but like forget that they're also people and they're also students and they also have a life, and like their entire world is not just who they are on the field. And so breaking down that barrier, and then also remembering mental health is health. So like if you are injured or if you are struggling with a knee, like he said, or struggling with, you broke your hand or anything like that, like you obviously go to the doctor to get help. Mental health is supposed to be the same way. So if you're struggling mentally, you're struggling with depression or bipolar, treating that like it is health, like you would for your hand, like you would for your knee, I think is really imperative. And so you kind of, and it's the same sort of thing too, kind of like they're in the weight room training all the time. You have to train your brain like you train your body. And so being able to implement the aftermath in the sense of people who already are struggling, going mental health is health and going to the doctor like you should, but also implementing the prevention method of being able to talk about it and open up and have those vulnerable conversations. Because hopefully if you have those ahead of time, that it will also be a prevention method, and being able to train your brain and how to react to certain things, kind of like you train your body when you're in the weight room. All of that kind of is our stories and things that we can get from football. Obviously we're kind of biased towards football, we're all kind of connected in that world, but you can use those stories of, and those synonyms of the weight room and of the mental health is health and those injuries, but bringing them into the real world for regular students on campus and training their mind and being able to prepare them preventatively and also afterwards, if telling them how, explaining to them how mental health is health.
What has been the reception from, for example, the sports psychologists that Michigan's athletic department puts into play? Because you guys, I feel like that's a natural collaboration.
Right. I mean, Carl, you can kind of touch on it too, but like initially our thought was to work with an outside group with BLND, and they're not contracted by the university, not really a part of like what the university offers. So we were kind of steered towards using CAPS, which is in a way, we're very happy that we're able to work with them as well, because it is kind of a licensed product that we're using to promote a campaign. You have to kind of work within the university's resources, which is great, because we think we're adding a lot of value to CAPS. But Carl, you can kind of touch on that as well.
Yeah, they were very beneficial. Abigail Eiler is the head of athletic counseling at Michigan, and she reached out to all of us to talk to us about the program and what we were doing. And she was actually the one that gave us the idea to go through CAPS, because we did have a licensing product or licensed product. We wanted to make sure she wanted to make sure that we weren't risking anything with NIL and all of those new rules that were things that we didn't necessarily think about at the very beginning. So she was very beneficial in that and coming into the scene to help us out and to give us those ideas. And I think she thought the idea was a good idea. She definitely wanted us to expand it since it was a campaign for all of students, which I think personally, I can speak for myself, but I think all of us want to expand the campaign. Like we had that video for the football players. I think we would also love to have a video of the students speaking out about their experiences with mental health and why it's important for them to seek help, because we do want to expand it past just athletics. That was just kind of our starting point. And so she definitely was very beneficial in giving us those ideas to work with CAPS and talking through the logistics of it all and being able to talk through NIL and coming up with questions and what we can and can't ask athletes and things like that. So they were definitely very helpful with that.
And then, I mean, obviously this is a college-centric initiative, but is there any plan to bring it down to local high schools?
Yeah, I think you can go either upwards or downwards with it, right? You can work with high school athletes and you can work with professional athletes. I think the message is clear to everybody, is that it's mental health is really important, and it's not just something you're dealing with while you're in college, not something you're just dealing with when you're in high school or you're a kid. It's an ongoing process, and it's something we'd love to be able to work with youth athletes, high school athletes, pro athletes, college athletes. Everyone that's applicable to. I think you can go either way with it.
And then why is mental health advocacy, especially in a college campus as large as Michigan is, and Brett, I think you were touching on it a little bit earlier, but why is this kind of the perfect storm for this kind of advocacy?
You're saying why is it a perfect match essentially for us to be doing a mental health initiative on a college campus, or
right? And using Division I athletes as kind of the sounding board spokespeople for it. Yeah,
I mean, I think it all ties back to the same things we've been saying, in the sense that mental health is I mean, extremely relevant to everybody, but most specifically to the younger audience. I forget the specific stat that Carly said before, but it was like the people aged
10 to 34.
yeah, exactly, are all suffering from depression, or maybe that was the suicide statistic. Regardless, it's just there's no doubt that people aged 18 to 22 or however old college students are absolutely suffering from mental health. And so there's no doubt that it's an extremely relevant cause that we needed to contribute to. And then those same individuals that maybe struggling fit into that same audience as a college student also admire these Division I athletes and care about them. So like having these athletes as our spokespeople and being the voice of the campaign definitely helped us kind of, I guess, maximize our efforts.
And then are there any other charities or initiatives that are doing similar work that you've either looked at to kind of model how you do yours or are looking to collaborate with in the future?
Okay.
Go ahead, Greg.
Okay, I was just saying, like, I don't know any groups doing it like how we are doing it. My initial thought for like raising money to help afford for better mental health services kind of stemmed from like seeing close family members of mine that are, right out of college and friends too, that like, the cost of affordable therapy and stuff that like makes a difference for some people. It's not covered by their insurance always. And so that added financial stress of either coming out of their own pocket or a family member's pocket to pay for their services almost adds another layer of difficulty and trauma to something somebody's already experiencing. So yeah, I mean, the idea like for us, like, obviously at Michigan with our licensed product, it's going towards caps, but like, bigger picture, if we expand past it, we'd probably like to be able to raise money and then help people receive, adequate mental health care and be able to take that like financial burden off of their back by using some of like the proceeds that we're generating through our apparel line or whatever products we're doing or however much money we're able to raise and make a difference that way, because that's like a whole nother side of mental health care that not many people are talking about. Because yes, it's great. You take the first step to go reach out and to start receiving help. But then once it starts kind of eating at your pocketbook and you're still trying to make ends meet another place in your life, you may not be able to afford it. So I think that's like another piece of this that we'd like to be able to work towards moving forward.
And it sounds like you're already getting there. I mean, you have a scholarship fund set up through Sack the Stigma, correct? I think I saw that on the website.
Correct. Yep. And that's set up through Michigan. Mm-hmm.
Who is eligible for that scholarship?
So I think my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, is the money is going through caps. So for example, let's say there's a list of people who are ready to be referred out. It's going to help those in need. Like, let's say there's a list, let's say our scholarship can cover 4 people on that list. They're going to hopefully use the top 4 that are on that list, the first 4 that are on the list. So that's why we want to continue to expand how much money we are able to raise so that we can help more people farther down the list. And I think that they're going to look and see who's needs based within that list as well, to be able to make sure that the money is going to people who need it. But that is kind of where the money is going. It is through caps, but like Jared was saying, we hope to also spread it out to be able to help them get referred to different places around Ann Arbor, but also if we take it to other cities and other levels, continuing to grow that fund to be able to pay for them there.
And then how do you see this expanding to, for example, Carly, other cities and other universities?
We talked about this a little bit. This is definitely the process that I think we want to start talking about more so now. But I know my mentors talked about spreading it in the sense of like talking to other coaches, bringing it to other college campuses, but also just hopefully raising awareness if we use the NFL players, like Jared was saying, to create those videos, to continue to create that that voice, and maybe we can create different logos because obviously we have the license in here for Michigan, but maybe bringing that to other colleges using their logos, or bringing it to different teams and being able to support different teams in that area. And maybe if we work with an NFL team, like we're working with Falcons or working with the Lions, like that would help inner city kids in Detroit or something like that if we're working with the Lions or things like that. So this is kind of all just like ideas that have been coming. But that's definitely the next path. Ideally, we would like to go down, is being able to spread that out. And hopefully through connections and through talking with people and through spreading the campaign as a whole, and hopefully getting traction and gaining trust from people that we are spreading and doing this for all the right reasons, then I think that hopefully will be able to get the ball rolling.
Absolutely. And we are reaching the time when I think my Zoom is about to kick us out. I think we've almost reached the 40-minute mark. Is there anything else that I have not talked about that you think needs a spotlight shown on it?
I mean, I feel we've covered it to a pretty good extent, kind of like what the campaign is and where we'd like to see this go. I mean, I just think the biggest thing is that, college sports are, I think, at like a new crossroads where like athletes can be a little bit more vocal about things that they're passionate in, with NIL being something new, and then be able to kind of express themselves more online. So just opens up the door to, cool initiatives and meaningful initiatives like this, where I think it can really make a difference. Obviously not only in your community here in Michigan, but on a broader scope with getting with other schools and tying that in. So yeah, we're really excited. They appreciate you again for having us on. I'm excited about where this is going for us.
Thanks for coming on. Let me check and see when this episode will come out. This episode will be posted on January, February, March, April 13th. So you have a couple solid weeks before you get bombarded with notifications. And if you guys can just send me pictures that I can use for social media, either of you specifically or of you in action, more information about Stack the Stigma, and then also the websites and links that we can purchase and help the cause. That would be great.
Sure. Yeah, we could send all that in the email.
Perfect. And I think that is just about it. I have all the questions that I wanted to ask done. Thank you guys so much for spending some time with me. And I'm really excited for this. This is a really amazing initiative.
Thank you so much for taking the time to do this. We appreciate
Thanks,
it.
Julia.
Thank you. It was great meeting you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.